Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Once again, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We've got quite a few folks who have joined, and we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to hear an update from us here at the State Board of Education about the 2016 Teacher Preparation Report Card. My name is Laura Inkblad. I'm the Director of Policy and Research here at the State Board, and I'm also joined by a colleague.
I'm Spencer Gwastik. I'm a research assistant at the State Board, and many of you have probably corresponded with me about the report card.
So we'll be walking you through a few of the key updates about the 2016 report card on teacher preparation this morning. So first, I just want to say, to ensure the best possible experience for everyone during the webinar, we have gone ahead and muted everyone both on the phone and through the participant app, those of you who are calling in over your computer. This is just to ensure that we don't get any background noise or kind of feedback coming in during the call. So we want to make sure that everyone can hear. We'll also, as you probably just heard, are recording this call. We will be posting the recording of the webinar if you'd like to go back and look at any particular points. We'll have that posted on our website. And that address will be up on the last slide at the end of the presentation today. If you've got questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to type those in as the lines are muted, as I just explained. But I would imagine that at this point in time, many of the questions that you all might have, particularly those of you on the call today who are representing Ed Prep programs or EPPs, are probably going to be pretty individual questions. So I just want to reiterate at the outset of our conversation today, and we'll do the same in the closing, that we are more than happy to follow up with folks specifically about questions or concerns that you might have, whether that's over email. We'll give an email address at the end of the presentation, or if it's more convenient for you, we are happy to set up a call with your particular institution if you've got specific questions. But if you have general questions that might apply to the entire group today, please feel free to enter those into the chat function and send those to my name, Laura Inkblad, as the host on the webinar. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. So I just want to also remind folks that we've got representatives from a lot of different groups on the line today. So we've definitely got a lot of representation from those who are administrators in our educator preparation programs, or EPPs, across the state. As we know, you all are a key audience in this report card. But we also have got a lot of folks who are representing districts who have joined us for today. And so I just want to thank you all as well. As we'll talk here in just a second, one of our key goals in the report card process has been to really think about how we can expand the use and the audience of the report card. So we're really thankful for those of you who are representing other groups like districts who have joined the call today. So first, we'll give a little bit of background just about the redesign process of the report card, some of the goals that we've set out and the feedback that we've gathered. And then we'll really walk through in depth today the performance framework that the report card will be using for the first time this year. And then we'll have a few screenshots that you can see of the new design of the report card. So this is kind of hot off the presses, what the new online version of the report card will look like. And then finally, we'll close out with a few updates about the release timeline and the rollout of the report card. So a bit of background about data reporting on our educator preparation programs. So many of you are likely familiar that we have, as a state, started to produce, and we're one of the first states to do this, to produce a report card about the effectiveness of teacher preparation programs. And we've been doing that since the mid-2000s, around 2007 or so is when that requirement to produce a report card began and was passed by the legislature. So we've had data on our educator preparation programs for a number of years in the state of Tennessee, and the report card has looked mainly the same way over the course of the last couple of years. So in 2016, the report card fully transitioned back over to the State Board and the Department of Education for production. Previously, it was produced by the Tennessee Higher Education Commission. And so given that the report card had been in existence for a number of years and it was at a natural transition point back over to the Department of Education and the State Board, we felt like it was already time to start thinking about a possible redesign of the report card. However, that became even more of interest to us to do a redesign when we started to think about the 2014 revision to the educator preparation policy, which calls for now the creation of annual reports. And so these annual reports are going to be providing really detailed data to our educator preparation programs. Some of the data that the report card used to previously provide will be really detailed and kind of granular level data for our ed prep programs. So that, in addition to the kind of natural transition points I just mentioned, allowed us to start to think about the use of the report card a little bit differently. So previously the report card tried to kind of be the main document reporting on educator preparation outcomes to all stakeholders. So we heard from our ed prep programs they wanted really detailed data. We hear from districts that sometimes they want higher level data. And so the report card had tried to do both of those things simultaneously, and with a single tool it's really difficult to set multiple purposes like that. So now with the addition of these annual reports that will be coming online for ed prep programs, that has allowed us to think about the report card a little bit differently. So throughout this redesign process, we've really tried to focus on the report card now as a higher level tool, a tool that's going to be really public facing, designed for use by external stakeholders. And so you can see here on this slide that while there will be these multiple reports that are generated on ed prep programs, that they are going to share similar data and definitions. So for those of you representing educator preparation programs on the line today, you can expect to see that while you'll have two reports that report on your university or your program, they're going to be sharing much of the same information. So as we like to talk about, these reports are going to be telling the same story. They're just going to be geared towards two different audiences. So when we started out this year in early 2016, thinking about a redesign of the report card, one of the first things we knew that we wanted to do was to, folks could mute their lines.
Later. Okay. Thanks.
All right. So one of the first things that we wanted to do this year was to start to gather stakeholder feedback. So we started out the year by surveying multiple different groups. We talked with folks representing districts, folks from our ed prep programs, as well as candidates who are currently enrolled in ed prep programs. So we surveyed individuals from these groups. We also did a series of focus groups around the state and really asked individuals attending and individuals taking the surveys what they liked about the current report card, what they wanted to see continue, as well as areas where they thought that the report card could be improved. So we've talked with over 450 stakeholders throughout the early parts of this year. And if you haven't yet been able to look at it, we've got a full feedback report that we've developed from those stakeholder conversations and surveys that's posted to our website. And one of the things I just want to reiterate that this feedback has been really helpful and influential in helping us create the redesigned report card, but we know this is not the end of the line. This report card is very much going to be an effort in continuous improvement. So one of the things that we'll be planning to do early in 2017, once the report card is launched, is to talk with individuals again via surveys and focus groups about the redesigned report card to solicit feedback about how we can continually improve that in future years. So after we analyzed all of the feedback we received from stakeholders, we set out some goals that we wanted to achieve in this redesigned report card. So one of the first that you'll see on the slide here, and if I could pick one goal as our most important goal, this would be it. Is really a focus on making sure that the report card is user-friendly. So probably the biggest trend that we heard during our feedback sessions with stakeholders across the state was that the report card information on the current report card, while possibly useful, was not presented in a way where individuals could really make sense of that report card in a quick fashion. And so that was one of the main things that we're seeking to achieve in this redesign process, is to make sure that we're presenting data and information in a clear and easy to read format. We've also tried to, with these next couple of goals, the goals of being focused and informative, have tried to really make sure that every piece of data that we put on the report card is an impactful piece of data. We know that as a state, we're able to report on lots of different data metrics. We collect lots of data as a state. However, in making sure that the report card is user-friendly, we also want to make sure that it's focused. So one of our mantras throughout this process has really been to say that we want to have less data, but presented in a more useful way. And then finally, accessibility is one of the other key goals. So as we surveyed folks about the usage of the report card, one of the first questions that we asked was, are you aware of the report card, and is it something that you use? And so we heard from a lot of individuals around the state that they simply weren't aware that this tool and this report existed. And so that will be one of our big areas of focus later this year, is with the release of the report card, is really targeting different stakeholder groups to make them aware that this information exists, and to partner with different types of users to really think about how they can use this information. One group I would be remiss to not mention in any presentation on the report card has been our advisory council that started meeting with us earlier this summer and has met with us throughout the course of the fall. You can see their names up here, and they represent a wide variety of different groups, from EPPs to districts to the advocacy community, and we even had a current student as a part of that group as well. And they've been instrumental in providing us feedback with everything from mock-ups of the design to the report card, but have also been instrumental in helping us work through a performance framework system. So want to thank them, and have really appreciated their involvement and their feedback throughout this process. So before we get into the performance framework, one of the things I want to highlight here is just as we talk with folks throughout the state about what they wanted to see in a report card, in addition to the theme of being user-friendly, the other kind of key trend and feedback emerged is that people wanted to be able to clearly see the areas of strength and the areas of challenge for our EPPs across the state. They felt that a good user-friendly, consumer-friendly report card would be one where you can easily see those areas of strength and areas of challenge. So as a result, one of the things that we have worked to do for the redesigned report card is to create a performance framework. And that performance framework is going to be our way of highlighting areas of strength and challenge. So you'll see here in a second that Spencer walks through that performance framework. It consists of a couple of different levels. So at the highest level, what you'll see for every EPP across the state that generates a report card, you'll see a performance category of 1 through 4, with 1 being the lowest and 4 being the highest. That performance category is determined by scores on 3 different domains, and Spencer will walk through those in a second. And then within each domain, there are a series of metrics, and so programs will earn, or providers will earn points on those metrics that then roll up into their domain level scores, and then finally into the performance category. We're also excited that with the redesigned report card, for the first time, we'll have an interactive online version of the report card. So there will still be the PDF versions available that the folks who are familiar with the report card have seen in the past. That will still be available, but there will be an online interactive version where you'll be able to sort through both state data as well as the provider level data. And there will also be an option to download a data set of information as well. So with that, those highlights, I'm going to turn it over to Spencer to talk through the specifics of the performance framework.
Good morning, everybody. So as Laura mentioned, this organizational structure of having different metrics that comprise 3 different domains, and then having those domains aggregate up to an overall performance category for each EPP is really at the heart of the redesigned report card. So I just wanted to walk everybody through what makes up the performance framework and how providers are going to earn the points that they do for this year and future versions of the report.
And just one note on this, I want to highlight that these, for those of you who have heard several of our updates before, so we did a previous update back in August, as well as those of you from EPPs who are at TACSE, that these metrics are the same ones that we've been talking about throughout those presentations. So the metrics have not changed, but what Spencer is updating on is the specific weighting and points allocated to each metric.
Great. So this year's version of the report card will have 75 total points available. Ultimately, we are intending to have 100 points on the report card, but we've decided to leave the remaining points available for metrics that we'll be adding in future years. In particular, we're hoping to add a satisfaction domain in the future. So we wanted to properly account for that and make sure that the point values stayed relatively similar to what they will be on future versions in this year's version. So I'm just going to go domain by domain and talk about how we allocated the points for this year's report card. For the first domain, the candidate profile, there are a total of 20 points available. 3 of these points are based on the percentage of completers at each EPP that have an ACT score of 21 or higher, or an SAT score of 1020 or higher. And this is intended to measure the incoming students and the type of admissions requirements that each EPP has, and we felt that it was important to include some metric about the level of rigor of each EPP, but again, this is only worth 3 points, so it's not as heavily weighted as more of the outcomes that I'll talk about later, which is something that we wanted to stress more heavily on this report card. And then the second metric that we have included in this domain is the percentage of racially and ethnically diverse completers. We've seen that there's somewhat of a disconnect between the demographics of our student population in Tennessee and our teacher population, so we felt that it was definitely important to see which EPPs are doing a good job of producing a diverse teacher force, and so we've allocated 7 points to that metric. And then the final metric in this domain is the percentage of high demand endorsements. So these are endorsements in English as a second language, in secondary math and secondary science, in Spanish, and then in special education, which are areas that we've identified as high need across the state. And so we've allocated 10 points here to measure how well each EPP is doing in producing teachers in the areas where they're most needed. So the second domain we have here is the employment domain. And in this domain there are 15 total points. So we decided to break that down by awarding 6 points for each EPP's first year placement rate. So this captures the percentage of teachers that end up teaching in a Tennessee public school classroom in the first year after they complete their preparation program. And then we've awarded 9 points for the beyond 1 year retention rate. So how many of those teachers who are placed in their first year are still teaching in a Tennessee public classroom in their second year. And we did hear some concerns from EPPs about including a placement metric because we aren't able to capture teachers that are teaching either out of the state at a private school or not necessarily teaching but using their education degree in the field. So that contributed to our decision to weight retention a bit higher because we have seen that it's important to have teachers who remain in the classroom and are able to benefit from their experience and become even more effective educators. And then finally, as I mentioned before, we really wanted to focus on outcomes and make this report card based on the outcomes that each EPP's teachers are able to have in the classroom. So we've weighted the provider impact domain the most highly. We've awarded 40 points for this category. And so this domain includes metrics for both average observation scores as well as TVOS composite scores. And we've decided to weight the percentage of completers with either an observation score or a TVOS score of 4 or 5. So our highly effective teachers more highly than the percentage of completers who are reaching at least a level 3 or meeting expectations. But we did feel that it was important to capture both of those metrics for both observation scores and for TVOS scores. So I'd also like to talk a little bit about how those points are awarded and how EPPs will earn the points that they do for each metric. So this graphic here illustrates an instance where a provider has earned a score of 70 on a metric and they've earned 8 out of 10 points. So how does that equate? How does 70% on this metric equal 8 points? We have a couple of different things going on here. First, you'll see the large dark blue circle, which represents the score that the provider received on that metric, so in this case 70. And you'll see that it's situated on a line that includes a highlighted blue range. So this range is the range of possible points available for the metric. You have a minimum standard, which in this case is 35 points, which is equal to the 10th percentile of EPPs that are included in the calculations and will receive a performance category this year. And then you'll receive 0 points if you earn anything less than this. But we also have a target that we're hoping that EPPs will be able to reach, which in this case is set at 80 points. and that's set at the 90th percentile of all providers that are going to be receiving a performance category this year. And the reasoning behind this was we wanted to, as Laura mentioned, highlight the areas of strength. So we felt that the 10% of highest performers on each metric really deserve the full credit for that and deserve to get all the points available there, as well as the areas where there is most need of improvement and potential for future gains. So we felt that the bottom 10% of providers for each metric shouldn't really be receiving any points there. And then within that range, the highlighted blue section of the graph, that's where you receive partial points. So as you can see in this example, 8 out of 10 points were earned, and essentially it's just a proportional calculation there. So you take the range of possible values, so 80 points minus 35 points, and then the percentage of points earned above the minimum standard divided by that total range will give you the value, in this case 8 points. And then one final thing I want to call out on this graphic is we also have a representation of the state average. So this is just, as you're viewing one EPP's report card, supposed to provide some context and situate the EPP's performance within the context of what's going on in the rest of the state. So now I just would like to talk a little bit about how we calculate the performance of each EPP on each metric. So what's the numerator, what's the denominator, how are we getting that they receive 70% of the points for each category or something like that. So for the candidate profile domain, starting with the ACT or SAT metric, only completers who received an ACT or SAT score and were then reported as having one of those were included in this calculation. So anyone who is admitted based off of a practice core score or using a waiver wouldn't be included here. And then basically any completer who had either an ACT score or an SAT score above that minimum requirement was counted. So the full percentage will be all of those completers divided by all of the completers with either an ACT or SAT score. Then moving on to the percentage of racially or ethnically diverse completers. This metric includes all completers whose reported race was Hispanic or Latino, American Indian or Alaskan Native, Asian, Black or African American, Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander, or 2 or more races. And this calculation also only includes those completers who had a reported race because we didn't want to judge the people whose race was not included one way or the other. Then for the percentage of high demand endorsements, as I mentioned before, this includes endorsements in English as a second language, secondary math, secondary science, so in this case biology, chemistry, or physics, Spanish, and then modified, comprehensive, or interventionist special education. And this calculation was made using the total number of endorsements issued by a provider for the completers that are included on the report card. So it's just the percentage of those endorsements that were in one of the areas that I mentioned. Then moving on to the employment domain, our first-year placement rate, as I mentioned before, is calculated based on teachers who are placed in a Tennessee public school in their first year. And an important note here is for this calculation, we're only including in the denominator teachers who received a Tennessee teacher license number. So based off all of those teachers, what % were placed in Tennessee public school? And then that metric serves as the denominator for our retention rate. So out of all of those teachers who were placed in their first year, how many of them are still teaching in a Tennessee public school classroom in their second year? Then finally, for the provider impact domain, we used all completers who either had an average observation score or a TVOS composite score as the denominator for their respective metrics. And then for observation scores, this was calculated using the same formula that's used in the team rubric. So anything with a decimal score of 2.75 or above would round up to a 3 and would therefore be included in our percent of completers with an observation score of 3+ category. And then anything that was 3.5 or higher would round up to 4 and would therefore be included in the observation score of 4 or 5. And one thing I want to call out here is that when possible, we'll be including an average of multiple years of observation scores. So since this year's report card will have 2 cohorts worth of completers, students who completed their preparation program in the 2013-14 school year will have an average observation score from the 2014-15 school year included as well. And then finally, for the TVOS scores, those were not rounded at all since we're using the TVOS composite, but again, we will be using the multi-year average when applicable. So now that we've kind of gone through what it takes to receive points for each individual metric and how those can be aggregated up into an overall performance category, I want to talk about the business rules that we created to determine who will be receiving an overall performance category distinction. So in order to generate a performance category, first EPPs must have at least 10 total completers. And as I mentioned just now, that's going to include 2 cohorts of data this year. In the future, we're hoping to include 3 years of data, but we didn't have data available for that this year. So for the 2016 report card, we'll just be including completers from the 2013-14 and 2014-15 academic school years. And then we will also require that EPPs have data for at least 10 completers for over half of the metrics in each domain. So that means for the provider impact domain, you'll have to have at least 3 out of the 4 metrics with data available for 10 completers. For employment, you'll have to have both a first-year placement rate and a beyond 1-year retention rate available. And then for candidate profile, you'll have to have 2 of the 3 metrics with at least years. So just to illustrate how that would look in practice, we've created a couple different scenarios to show when an EPP wouldn't be receiving a performance category. So here in scenario A, an EPP has 3 completers in the 2013-14 cohort and then an additional 6 completers in the 2014-15 cohort. So since that's only 9 completers across the 2 years, they won't be receiving an overall performance category and won't be included in the calculations for the report cards this year. And then in scenario B, the EPP does have over 10 completers total, so they meet that first distinction, but they only have TVOS data available for 9 of their completers. And since the TVOS metrics comprise half of the provider impact domain, they wouldn't be receiving a score for that domain and therefore won't receive an overall report card performance category. But another thing that I want to note here is that we will still be reporting all of the data that we have available for any metric where an EPP does have data for at least 10 completers. Those scores just won't be included in any of our calculations, and those providers won't receive either domain scores or an overall score. And then finally, I just wanted to talk a little bit about how this is probably going to look once we do assign performance categories for EPPs. These calculations are based off of somewhat incomplete data due to the difficulties with TN-Ready testing this year. We're still waiting to get back this year's TVOS data, so this isn't exactly how things will look on the actual report card, but we felt it would be helpful for people to see a mock-up of what the distribution of performance categories is going to look like. So using the data that we have and the performance framework that I just discussed, we found that 15% of our EPPs who will be receiving a performance category were in performance category 1, 33% were in performance category 2, 41% were in performance category 3, and then 11% were in our highest performance category 4.
So now that we've walked through the specific performance framework and the business rules for the generation of the overall performance category pieces, I thought it would be also helpful for folks to see a little bit about how this is going to look this year. And so not only is the creation of a performance framework a new piece to the report card, but that has allowed us to do a pretty comprehensive redesign of the visual features of the report card as well. So as I mentioned at the outset a couple of slides earlier, we are not only going to have the PDF versions of the report cards, but we will also have an online interactive website. And so the screenshots that I'm getting ready to share with you come from that online interactive website. And I know they may be a little bit difficult to see on the slides here, but we will post a PDF of these slides following the webinar as well. And so you can perhaps zoom in a little bit more closely on those slides, the details. So what users will first encounter when they log onto our report card page is a landing page that looks much like this. So one of the first things that folks will see is a section at the top. They can enter the name of a provider and immediately go to that provider's report card. They can also look at a section around how to read this report. They can download the state report, which will have the aggregate measures across all metrics. And then they can also do a data download that will be available to if they want to manipulate the data in a different way. And then finally at the bottom of that page will be a complete, right now you see placeholder text in a lot of the spaces of the screenshots that I'm sharing with you. But there will be a list of all of the educator preparation providers listed in the left-hand column. We'll have the number of completers for each of those providers in the immediate column, and then you'll see the overall performance category as well as the performance categories for each of the different domains. So we thought that this would be really helpful so that if, as a user of the report card, if you're really focused on the measures that are in the employment domain, so perhaps you're most concerned about first-year placement and retention, if I'm maybe a person who is looking to select an educator preparation provider, I might be most interested in those pieces. So I can focus on those domain scores at that level if I'd like to, in addition to looking at the overall performance category. And then finally on the right-hand side there, you'll see an option to download the report, and that will take you to the PDF version of that EPP's report card. So if you want to continue to navigate through the online website, you can either search for a provider at the top, or you can select a provider from the list below to go to their provider-specific report card. Once you go to their provider-specific report card, the first thing that you'll see is a profile page. So on this page, you'll notice at the top it will have the logo and the name of the provider, as well as information about their performance category, and the percentage of total points they've earned on the report card will be a consistent header across all of the pages for that provider. But on the profile page specifically, what you'll first see is a map that shows the placement of that provider's completers. You'll also see information regarding the website and the main contact for that program, whether it be the dean or the director of the education school. And then you'll see a description that's been provided by all of our EPPs about what their program and their institution, some of the highlights that they wanted to call folks' attention to. When you scroll down on the profile page, the next thing that you'll see is some basic background information about the completers from that particular provider. So you'll see some information regarding the demographics of the completers. So here you can see there will be an enrollment by race or ethnicity. We'll also have some of the key information that had been provided on the report card previously about what is the state of residency of completers that are enrolled in that program. We've also got some information about what type of initial license did completers from that program receive, and as well as what different types of clinical practice might be provided. Some of the other information that will be on that page is regarding practice completion rates. There will also be information about admissions tests that the universities or programs use. So in addition to ACT or SAT, you'll also be able to see the percentage of completers the university list at some of the other tests for their admissions requirements. So GRE, Miller Analogy, et cetera, will be listed on there as well. The next page that you'll encounter is the overall report card page for a particular provider. So here you'll be able to see a summary of their performance. So you'll see the overall performance at the top, as well as the performance for each one of the domains underneath that. And then from there you can navigate to any of the specific domain pages to see the more detailed metrics. So this is an example of the domain-specific page for a provider for the employment domain. So here you'll see, once again, the domain performance across the top. And then you'll see the specific metrics that make up that domain. So in this case, first-year placement rate and the beyond year one retention rate. So there will be a definition or a description of how the metric is calculated, and then you'll see the same metric visuals that Spencer explained earlier. So within the shaded bar, a provider is earning some percentage of the points. They're above the shaded bar, to the right of the shaded bar, they're earning all of the points. If they're below the shaded bar, they're earning none of the available points. And then the number of points that the provider will earn will be immediately to the right of that graphic. So you can see how many points the provider earns for each domain on this particular page. So with that preview, I want to next shift to just talking about our release timeline. So as Spencer mentioned, we are still in the waiting stage for one last piece of data before we can officially finalize dates for everything, but wanted to go ahead and get some dates on folks' calendar. We think that these dates are pretty solid. We're fully expecting that last piece of data to come in here in the next couple of weeks. So one of the things that we're excited to be able to provide this year that's a little bit different from last year is for EPPs. In advance of the actual embargoed release, we're going to have an EPP-specific review window, so you'll be able to look at the PDF of your report card and be able to send to us any data questions or corrections that you might have. We're anticipating that that will be no later than the week of November 21st. There will be a quick turnaround for providing any of those questions or corrections in order for us to get those implemented if any changes need to be made prior to the release that we're targeting, which is going to be in the second week of December. So we anticipate during that second week of December, we'll have an embargoed release to all providers across the state, as well as to media outlets early on that week, around the Monday or Tuesday, December 5th or 6th. And then the actual official release date will be December 8th, is what we're anticipating. Once again, we will finalize that as soon as we have the last piece of data in our hands. And that will be when the website goes live, and all of the PDFs are also available along that website. I will also highlight we're planning to do a launch event here in Nashville, and so I'm sure many of you will be sending out additional information about that, and we would love for you to join us on that date. One of the other things I want to highlight that we're particularly excited about, and I hope that this will be particularly good news for those of you on the EPP side of things, is that we're planning to put together a pretty comprehensive technical report that will also be available when the website launches. And so that will go into much more detail about how each of the specific metrics has been calculated, the specific numerator and denominator, and we're also hoping to get you some EPP-specific tools that will help with the analysis of who's included in your report card. And then finally, one last thing to highlight is this spring we'll be continuing to collect feedback through surveys and focus groups. And then we're also actively thinking around releasing some subject or topic-specific follow-up reports. So for example, one of the things that we know we want to dig in further is for some endorsement areas, so let's say, literacy or secondary math or science, we may want to do some in-depth reporting about EPP performance in some of those specific areas. And so we're thinking about a series of follow-up reports or briefs that would be released in the spring that goes a little bit more in depth with some of the report card information that we have. So those of you who have ideas for what types of follow-up reports might be helpful to you, we would love to get that feedback from you and be able to think about that as we start to plan for creating some of those follow-up reports. And then finally, in closing, I just want to thank everyone for your attendance today. We know that many of you have been engaged with us throughout this redesign process since last year even, and particularly early this year, and we just want to thank you for your continued feedback. The feedback that we've received has been incredibly helpful and influential in creating this redesigned report card, and so we thank you for your engagement and interest in this work. All of our documents and updates are going to be posted to our Teacher Prep Report Card website that is listed up here, so you can find information from previous webinars or presentations on that site. We'll be posting a link to this webinar recording as well as a PDF of the slides there. And then as you have questions or concerns following up the report card or this webinar today, Spencer is going to serve as our kind of collector of all of those feedback and questions. And so from there we will triage everything to make sure that we can get you responses to your questions or concerns as quickly as possible. And once again, I just want to reiterate that if you've got some very specific questions, we are more than happy to set up a call to walk through that with anyone. So don't hesitate to let us know if you would like to do that as well. But finally, once again, I want to thank you all. We're really excited as we get closer and closer to this launch of a redesigned report card. We're excited to get this tool out there and are also excited to hear your feedback and already thinking about ways that we can improve things for the 2017. So with that, we will hang on to see if any more comments or questions get entered into the chat feature. But with that, we are close to the day, and we appreciate your time and attendance.